Yeah, you're doing, I feel like elk, big game hunting is more like type 2 fun. A lot of it sucks a lot while you're doing it. And then when you get done, you're like, yeah, that was awesome. Let's go do that again.
Yeah.
At 45 years old, I'm like, give me a couple of days and then let's go do that again. Where with bird hunting in particular, especially waterfowl hunting, you can sit in a blind and you can laugh and you can tell stories and you can fellowship and you're drinking, drinking Juniper Mountain coffee and sitting there with a bag of donuts and you're just chilling. And it's so much of that, especially after a fall in the West, the way our seasons are structured, bird hunting comes second for me, especially. November, December, January, and February are the times when I'm really hard focused on bird hunting.
What's going on? Hope you're having a fantastic weekend. This is a great conversation, especially for you waterfowl hunters, bird hunters, but overall, in general, just conservation and wanting to get outdoors. Todd Helms is an outstanding guy over there at Eastmans. He does multiple things, wears multiple hats over there. So you'll definitely want to get in on this conversation and hear about that, along with, again, waterfowl, bird hunting, getting outdoors in general, conservation. So many topics that we touch on in this one. Get into it, guys. Hope you enjoy this. Also, don't forget that during the month of March, we're doing the March Madness giveaway. All you have to do is check out the link down below, go over to the Instagram post and share that. And then, of course, if you're on Instagram, share your rucks every single time you go out for a ruck. Hashtag March Madness in the post and tag me, tag my gear channel, and tag GoRuck. I'm super grateful that GoRuck has been a partner for a while of the show, and they're willing to get in on this giveaway with you guys. I want to get their gear in your hands, so go check it out. Get in on the March Madness giveaway, and now enjoy this conversation with Todd Helms. Let's go after it. Welcome back, everyone. I have an amazing guest here. We've got Todd Helms. Todd Helms is from Eastmans. He is the managing editor, and he's also the Wingmen Editor-in-Chief for the Wingmen podcast. So the Wingmen podcast host as well over there at Eastmans. He does some outstanding things, obviously enjoys having conversations like I do because he's a podcaster. And but most of all, I mean, the fact that you're a editor, I mean, that blows my mind. Not many people read nowadays. They like the short little captions with a fancy picture, and so that's pretty awesome that you're enjoying that and making things worthwhile for people to read. So, but with that being said, Todd, who are you for people that don't know you? What do you enjoy in a nutshell?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. This is it's always fun to jump on other people's podcasts and be a guest, because I don't get to do that very often. When you're a podcaster, you're always the guy doing the recording, but it's a little part of what I do. I was fortunate enough, I started my career in education as an English teacher and a coach, and got the opportunity to come work for Eastmans about, I don't know, 7 years ago now as the editor. And it's been fun. It's been fun. It's amazing. And when people think reading or editing, they just think like stories and like the written word and essays you had to write for creative writing class in college or in high school. And it's so much more than that. It's everything from podcast descriptions to social media posts, you name it. It's got to be edited or written and produced. Blog content. Blogs are enormous. That's something that treadmill, I never get off of it. I'm trying to get caught up so I can go hunting for a few days over Thanksgiving and spend some time with family. And you got to feed that monster so you can walk away from it, so it doesn't eat you alive when you come back to it. But
oh yeah,
I love to hunt. I've been a hunter my whole life, since I was a little kid. Been into it. Big game. I've said it before. It could be rats at the dump. I don't care. I'm in. If it's hunting involved, I'm in. I don't care. I have my preferences. I love hunting elk with a bow in September and late season with a rifle, which is the tag I have coming up. And I love to hunt birds, upland birds and waterfowl, especially just, man, hunting ducks. And yeah, if I could chase it with my dogs or call it in, I'm down. I'm down. I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely something that's interesting. First off, being on the other end of the microphone, anytime I get invited on a podcast, it's like I want to ask questions, but it's not my place to ask the questions. And then
I know, dude. It's weird. It's like I want to start asking you about you, but I guess that I'd be a poor
yeah.
guest if I did that.
Yeah, people don't come here to listen to me. They come here to listen to my guests. But no, the idea of being able to hunt anything, and it's funny because I just had this conversation with my wife this morning. Now, this is probably going to come out in a month or so, but right now it's the week of Thanksgiving. I absolutely love this week. It's outstanding. I just got back from my first whitetail hunt. I was gone for a week, and and my wife, she's such a saint. I always try and give her shout out. She doesn't like getting the spotlight. So I haven't had her on the podcast yet, but she really is the reason why I can go out and do all these things. And so I just went to her. I was like, hey, babe, we're supposed to get a really bad snowstorm over Thanksgiving Day. So am I okay to go out with my buddy on Friday morning to go chase elk? She's like, didn't you just get back? I'm like, yep. And I brought meat home, and I'm gonna go get another elk. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. But I get it, man. It's trying to play catch up, and it's a treadmill for sure. Just trying to keep things rolling, and the machine doesn't stop even though you're unplugged and out in the mountains.
No, that's 100%, man. And trying to have everything dialed ahead of time so you can just come back and jump in without missing too much is the hardest part. We
Oh yeah.
do at Eastmans, we do our own magazines. We do the hunting journals and the bow hunting journals on top of, I don't know, I think we have 6 podcasts now that I edit. I don't edit the podcast, but edit the descriptions or write the descriptions, either way. Full slate of social media, YouTube, TV. I mean, it's a massive thing. On top of, we also produce the Mule Deer Foundation's magazine for them.
Oh wow.
And so, yeah. And so there's a lot of times where I will be working on creating a copy of our magazine. Say right now I'm working on Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal issue 141 and the Mule Deer Foundation Q1 for 2024.
Sheesh.
And so, yeah, it's a lot. And so being able to take a couple days and get out and hunt is tough, but you got to do it. The other thing I have to make sure I balance is tags. When I'm applying for tags, it just works out that the timing of production for especially print publications, I have time in November and I have time in December. And November's wide open. I don't have a single print date in November. So what I do is, like this year, I've got a late bull elk tag, and it opened, I think, the 10th or 11th of November, and it runs to the end, to the new year.
Yeah.
And so I won't even think about hunting that bull tag until the weather gets just nasty. Right now, I don't know what it's like where you are, but it's warm. It's sunny every day. It's about 30 degrees every night, and the animals, any big game animal, is just kind of hanging out. Life's easy for them right now. They don't have to move. The wife and I have a couple of late season cow elk tags. It'd be nice to put meat in the freezer, but yeah, do I want to mess with an elk when it's 60 degrees every day? Nah, I'll wait until it's super cold and I can just hang it in a tree in the backyard until I can get to it,
Exactly. And that's the other thing too is and that's why when I saw that weather well, actually my wife said it because I was like, I'm not even, and she's gonna be mad about this, but luckily she won't see this till after this weekend. But I wasn't even considering going hunting this weekend at all. Like I had zero desire. I was like, I'm gonna spend time with the family. I've been gone for a week. And she goes, we're supposed to get this really bad snowstorm on Thursday. I was like,
I'm checking the forecast right now, bro.
right? I was like, all right. So Friday morning, it's clear skies. It's going to be in the 20s. I'm like, oh man, here we go. Yeah, exactly.
Thursday, Turkey Day is gonna be put that bird on early and probably go to the woods. Probably go look for an elk. Friday is definitely going to be an elk hunting day, no doubt
Yep.
about it.
I texted.
That's
It's
going to
funny
be
because she
perfect.
said that to me. I looked at the weather. I took a screenshot and I sent it to my best friend. He doesn't really get a lot of time off because he owns the place that he works at. He's a CPA firm. He owns the firm, so he's like
Mm-hmm.
in it all the time. And there's always a new tax deadline. So anyway, we don't get to hunt a lot together. He's the one that got me into Western hunting. And so I'd send him the screenshot. I was like, hey, you're not doing any shopping Friday morning, right? So let's go grocery shopping and kill an elk. He was like, all right.
It ain't Black Friday, bro. It's Elk Friday.
Exactly. I was like,
Elk
there's going to be an
Friday.
elk, or he's got a mule deer tag too. So I was like, something's going down on Friday. So
That's awesome. So remind me where you're located.
So I'm in Utah.
Okay. I thought
Yeah.
so, but I couldn't remember if it was Utah or Idaho.
Yep. Yeah, I'm in
Okay,
Utah.
cool. Okay,
It's a
perfect.
beautiful country. You know, I grew up in North Carolina, and then I moved out here, and I was going to move back, and fell in love with the public land, and going back to Ohio this week for whitetail hunting reminded me, like, I love it. It's awesome culture. I won't ever move back east. It's
Yeah.
just it's not for me anymore. And nothing against it or anything like that, but it's a different, like, I'll go out there probably every year now and go whitetail hunting, but I just can't. I couldn't stay there for a long period of time. You know, it's just different.
I'm 100% in line with you. I moved to Wyoming 16 going on 17 years ago, and I go back visit. I haven't been back to my home state of Michigan in I don't even know how long. It's been a really long time. All of my family relocated to Iowa. My brother first, about the same time I moved to Wyoming, he moved to Iowa. And then my parents, when we started he got married, I got married, then he got married, and we both started having kids. And our parents were like, this is stupid. We're living in Michigan and all our families in other states.
Yeah.
So they got looking around at what was the best fit for them, and they moved to Iowa. So my wife is from Iowa. It's wild how God works in your life. My wife's family, my wife grew up about 45 minutes south of where my brother and parents live.
Mhm.
So we get it all done in one shot. If I go back there for Christmas and with a late muzzleloader whitetail tag, all the family's right there. And it's wild because my family's not from Iowa. And so for them to move there and then me to marry a girl who lives in the same area is just God's plan. He's pretty incredible how that works out.
Exactly. No, I agree 100% there. So let's talk a little bit about, there's a lot of people that reach out to me about podcasting, getting started with that. I've kind of given my perspective on it, and I kind of want to hear your perspective. You run definitely a bigger organization and operation than I do. And so just kind of, talking about that treadmill and keeping things going while you're gone, because you can't just let it stop, because that's the whole game, is consistency, and people are waiting for your podcast to come out, etc. But what are some, maybe, I guess, top 3 things that you would recommend to people getting into podcasting or content creation, on a general kind of broad scale, but maybe even more so podcasting? What would you recommend to them?
Don't.
All right, with that, guys, we're gonna end the podcast.
Yep. Yeah. No, being able to don't feel like you've got to do it all and be it all right out of the gate. You look at anybody that's great at anything, and they usually start with small steps, and it's a progression. I feel like way too many people, whether it's podcasting or social media or starting a business or my own profession of being in education, they feel like they have to be this world beater right out of the gate, and that is so wrong and so not true. Take it in little steps and be dedicated and be serious about it. If it's something that you really want to do, then you have to be serious about it. Otherwise, you're never going to be successful at it. But don't feel like you're you're not successful because you're not at a certain point with it. Somebody else is. Your growth will come through consistency and through good content and being true to who you are. You know, when I first started the Wingmen podcast, it was the second podcast that we started at Eastmans. Eastman's Elevated with host Brian Barney. Excuse me, I'm still battling a cold. That was our first podcast, and that's our biggest and most popular still. With the Wingmen podcast, we were encouraged by some partners of ours or some sponsors of ours at the time to do it, get into it. And at first I was you're trying to find your feet, you're trying to find your voice, figure out who you are.
Right.
And that kind of develops over time. The more of them that you do, you just jump in with both feet and go. And then when you find who you are and what you are, stay with that, because you start to gain an audience who expects to hear a certain thing, hear certain guests, hear you talk about certain things. And if you deviate from that, you're gonna, in trying to grow or trying to attract a new audience, you're gonna alienate your old audience instead of, and you're not gonna grow because you're gonna lack that consistency.
Right.
So I think that the three things I would say were, number one, just go for it. If it's something that you're interested in, you want to do, go for it. Buy the best equipment that you can afford. Don't feel like you have to have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of equipment to get started. Just do what you can, get started, and just keep rolling. And as you start to experience some success, invest in the process and invest in yourself. So those are kind of the things that I would tell people, and be true to yourself. You know, once you develop a voice and an audience, stay with it. Stay with it.
No, 100%. It's one of those things that, like, I feel like nowadays, one, there's a lot of comparison, and like I can't compare my podcast to Joe Rogan's. Like that's just ridiculous.
That's the thief of joy, man. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Exactly. And so, you know, it blows my mind. Like I'll go on and I'll look up some statistics as far as engagement across different platforms and what's the average. And I'm looking at my numbers and I'm like, man, I'm really low on engagement. And then I go compare it to what the industry average is. I'm like, oh, wow. Like I'm well above the average. Okay, I'm good. You know, and obviously numbers and data is kind of a big thing. You want to make sure that you're maybe not changing who you are, but maybe how you're presenting it, or certain keywords that you put in, like what you do with editing. You want to make sure that things are hitting the algorithm, whichever one that is, between YouTube, Instagram, Google. You want to be popping up in places. And like, for example, like this microphone, you know, I got this microphone after I hit a certain milestone that I'd set for myself. You know, you can go on Amazon and buy a $60 microphone that plugs in USB to your laptop and get started podcasting. I mean, every MacBook has GarageBand, and that's what I started with. And then once I hit a certain level, I was like, okay, now this is worth me upgrading my equipment to get I'm not even going to know the terminology. I think it's a XLR cable, and you know, this upgraded microphone and a stand and like all this stuff. I'm like, now I can do that, you know. And so I would agree with you. Kind of do it by scale rather than jumping all in, because then again, you're going to get frustrated by not getting these huge numbers that you think. No one knows who you are unless you have a platform like Joe Rogan, for example, where he had been a comedian, UFC announcer, like all of these things. Of course, people are going to flock to his podcast immediately. For me, it was, you know what? I'm a nobody that just loves getting outdoors. And I'm not even going to invite people on until I think it was like 30 episodes, 20 or 30 episodes solo before I even invited a guest on, because I'm like, I need to show that I am consistent, you know? So yeah,
The
those
other
are all
thing,
good tips.
yeah, and there's one more thing that I did right out of the gate, because I'm not afraid to ask. And I had pretty big leg up having the Eastman's name connected to Wingmen and what I did. But the Eastman's name is a big game. That's a big game brand, a Western big game brand. It's not a brand in the waterfowl space or the upland bird hunting space or the wing shooting space, for that matter, at all. But I still asked, you know, and I had I got lucky because I had some connections in the industry through Eastmans that I was able to get some pretty good guests right out of the gate. But there's also been some guests that I've had on that blows my mind that they would come on my podcast. You know, I got Kevin Van Dam, for example, KVD.
Wow.
All I did was reach out to him on social media and told him who I was and asked if he'd be willing to sit down and record a podcast. And he said yes. And that blew my mind that somebody that is an A-lister in the outdoors, you know, and he said yes. You got to remember that your guests are people just like you are, and they have interesting stories, and most of them are willing to tell those stories, and they're willing to come on and share their knowledge and their passion and their stories with you, and you'll never get that opportunity if you don't ask them.
Exactly. No, that's
it's kind of like asking out the hot chick in the bar. You know, I didn't ask out the hot chick in the bar. I asked out the hot chick in church, and I outkicked my coverage big time. You know, and but it wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have asked.
Exactly.
She'd have just been like, "No, who's the new guy?" You know.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's 100%, man. It's you know, I saw something today. It was like, what was it? I'm going to butcher the quote probably, but it was along the lines of, the one thing that I learned from Monopoly is that if you don't take risks, then you're going to end up paying rent to the person that did. And so I didn't know that quote obviously until today, but I feel like I've lived a lot of things that way, where even to the point where sometimes my wife's like, well, what's your plan? How are you going to recoup this? I'm like, I don't know, but it's going to happen. I'm going to make it happen, whatever, you know? And so then you just got to put in the work behind it, you know, and that's just kind of how it goes.
Oh, that's spot on. That's so much of life is that way. Whether we're talking about an elk hunt, for example, or we're talking about, you know, creating a podcast or social media or content of any kind, you have to be willing to fall flat on your face to experience some success. And as you gain experience and as you gain wisdom, you're going to fail less over time. But you're probably still going to continue to fail, and if you're not, then you've probably peaked and plateaued, and you're not growing as a human being anyway. And so it's just life, you know, and so much of that stuff can apply to hunting and can apply to anything. You know, I look at where I'm at as a dad, and I'm not where I want to be. You know, I fall flat on my face every day, and then I'm sitting there watching Sunday night football, you know, winding down for the weekend, getting my brain wrapped around what's coming up this week, and thinking back on some of the interactions I had as a father over the weekend, and went, could have handled that different, could have done that different. And so that if you're paying attention, not just on autopilot, and you're intentional about what you do, then you're going to think about those things, and you're going to make corrections. You're going to course correct as you go and be better for it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely agree with that as well. And, you know, being away from the kids for a week, and then before that on my, it was like 10-day elk hunt. It definitely brings, like, I start to realize the things that are more important, rather than when I get frustrated with the kids, or mainly my son, to be honest with you. But, you know, it's something that, or my youngest son, because I've got multiple sons, but my youngest son is he's the kicker. So
let me guess, he's just like you.
You know, it's funny because yes, he's got some of my wife's tendencies, but he's definitely, it's funny because there was something that popped up when it was like, I can't remember the name of the comedian, but he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he did this like, and like takes his headphones off. He's like, just makes you want to kick a fat kid in Target or something like that.
Theo Vaughn,
yes.
something.
Yeah.
So you know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I sent that to my wife because the caption said, it was like, when you spend all week arguing with your husband's mini-me that has your attitude. And I'm like,
Yeah, dude. My daughters, I have two daughters, and my youngest is a boy.
Hmm.
And I thought, man, I want a son. I can't wait to have a son, and I hope he's just like me. Be careful what you wish for, because all the
Yep.
things about him that are aggravating and frustrating and difficult to deal with, man, I see them in myself, and
Mhm.
they are my areas that I want to change. But there again, if I can, because I've lived that as he's little and until he quits listening to dad, if I can help, you know, because they're not his, and it's the same way with yours.
Mhm.
I'm sure they're not necessarily bad things
Mm-mm.
or bad qualities or bad traits. They're just because you don't care for them necessarily about yourself. You don't see them in your kid. But we also have the experience of we've lived them. We've learned how to cope with some of those things and deal with some of those things. So we're situated perfectly as dads to guide and to help say, okay, these are the minefields that I've stepped in over the years because I think like this, or I react like this, or I have this kind of a temper. And let me kind of mold you and help you into, different minefields of your that you're gonna
Mhm.
find. But man, yeah, I was sitting there last night watching them all run around, and I'm like, dude, we're wrestling on the floor, by the wood stove with Monday Night Footballs on, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I need to remember these things. Like you said, getting some distance sometimes, going on a hunt and being away for a few days is really good clarity. I think it helps me refocus who I am as a husband, who I am as a dad, who I am and who I want to be as a person. And it's that time away from the daily stuff that
Mhm.
we started the podcast talking about, being on the treadmill and having to do so much to get to stay with things or ahead of things. But we also have to take that time to get away. Otherwise, we just become dulled down shadows of who we are and who we should be. I got to have that time. I got to have those late season hunts. I've got to have that time where I just go, where it's just me or me and a couple buddies, and we go hunt or we go fish or do something that we love to do, because it sharpens me and I come back a better version of who I am. And I've had
Mm.
a chance to unpack some of the things that are going on in my life, and I look at things with a fresh perspective, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I've been backward about this, or I've been too caught up in the rat race, and now I've had some time. I can see more clearly what I need to be and what I should be. And I don't know, you got to have that stuff. At least that works. That's the way it works for me. And my
Yeah.
wife gets that. She knows that, and I spend so much of my time. She's a fairly new hunter, and I spend so much of my time trying to ensure her success, that it comes at the cost of my own. And I'm okay with that, because I'm at that point in my hunting where I get as much or more of a thrill out of watching someone be successful than I get when I'm successful. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still love pulling the trigger, but it's different when you watch your kids be successful, your wife be successful. Or last week, I had a buddy's dad who had max deer points here in
Mm.
Wyoming, and he called me early in the year, because one of the things that we do here at Eastmans is we do hunting research. That's one of the things we started. We were the first ones to do that, to help people figure out how to draw a tag in a state, where to apply, what to look at, different hunts. And we still do that with our Tag Hub 2.0, break down draw odds and all kinds of stuff for
Yeah.
people. So I got a phone call from a good friend. He's like, hey, my dad's got max points. I know the winter was really brutal last year. What do you think for deer? And there were basically 2 units for point holders like him that have buku points that are worth the spend, that the juice is going to be worth the squeeze. And there's only two of them in the state at the moment. and I told him, I said, one of them is good. It's a really fun hunt. Um, the trophy quality is top end is going to be about 180 for a buck. I said, can you find a bigger deer? Yeah, but you better be willing to eat the tag. Any 180 buck that you find, you better seriously be thinking about taking, because it's kind of top end for that unit. I said the other unit is not 100% draw, even with max points, and it's got better trophy quality, but he's going to need to hire an outfitter because he'll need access to private land where the big deer are rutting this time of year. We had a chance to go out. He drew the tag that I suggest, one of the tags I suggested, and it wasn't the outfit, it's a DIY one. I said, I'll help you. You know, it's close to home, and I know that unit really, really well, and I'll help you. And I was able to take a couple days off, and we went out the first day, and we're in deer. This is phenomenal, and lots of nice deer. And his dad's retirement age, older guy, and he had a nasty chest cold. He couldn't walk, he couldn't hike. And I said, you know what? I said, I've got a couple of spots that I think we can get into that are without a lot of effort, and let's see if we can get it done. And lo and behold, that evening he killed a really, really nice deer. Probably mid 170s buck, but he had a bunch of cool character to him. Mm-hmm. Had some flyers off his back forks that were just super cool and unique. And it was just the right situation. And this is a guy that grew up hunting in the heyday in California, the Modoc County days, when he's got probably a dozen 200-inch mule deer on his wall. So he's not gonna top that necessarily, but it was looking for the experience, hunting with his son in a new area, beautiful country.
Oh yeah,
a rut hunt, and then we found this super cool buck that had character, and it just worked out. And watching him shoot that buck with his son there, whose son's in his 30s, just to be kind of a fly on the wall for that father-son thing, that was awesome. I don't need to shoot a deer this year because I got to be part of that. You know, yeah. It was super cool.
No, that's awesome. That is really cool that you get to have those experiences over there working at Eastmans. It's you know, I'm excited to have those moments with my son. And kind of going back to what you were saying about taking time away, I always harp on this as well. Make sure that even if you come back unsuccessful, you've gained something from that time away. Because if you come back and just a total jerk after not tagging out, then your wife's not going to want you to go hunting. Your kids are not going to want you to go hunting. They're not going to like dad when he comes home, you know?
Right.
And when they hear that you're not successful, they're going to start to kind of worry about the fact that you weren't successful when you get home. And so that's why for me, like, even when I do come home unsuccessful, I like to kind of walk the kids through why that's okay, what I did enjoy while I was out there, so that they can get that mindset rather than I need to have a huge deer every single time or a huge elk every single time or whatever. You know, I came back from the whitetail hunt with a doe, and yeah, I spot and stalked a whitetail doe. So, you know, that's a fun story.
That's an accomplishment, dude.
Actually did it twice, but I only had permission to shoot one. So, yeah, so I didn't come back with a buck, which was kind of a bummer, but at the same time, like, it was an awesome experience, and I got to walk my kids through that. And, of course, the first thing that my son, because even when I go and help other people, most people leave the heart and guts and all that stuff out there.
Right.
And I've tried just about every organ, and I haven't tried lungs, you know, all that other weird stuff.
Yeah,
but
I don't know about eating lungs.
I don't think you can eat lungs, but I can't do liver. It's a little too strong for me. Can't do kidneys. I just can't wrap my head around that. But we always bring home the heart, even if it's someone else's animal. I always ask if that can be part of the meat that they offer me. And so anyway, I didn't bring it home because that was the first thing we ate at camp, and my son was a little bummed about that. And then, of course, the next thing, and he's only 9, the next thing he asked was, do you have the tenderloins?
Uh-huh.
So he knows we cook it in that order. It's heart, tenderloins, backstrap. And I was like, no, we cook the tenderloins as well. He was like, all right, Yeah, backstrap though, right? I was like, yeah, we got. So he knows at such a young age what the real trophy is. Like he thinks these antlers back here are cool and all that, but he's like,
Oh
I
yeah,
want the meat. I want the meat. You
I
know?
love it. I love it. My
Oh yeah.
kids, my kids are pretty similar. And we're pretty when it's time to fill tags, like doe tags or cow tags, it's you go fill tags, but we've gotten to be pretty selective on our buck tags or our bull tags, and depending on what it is, is it a general over the counter tag? Your standards go down, quite a bit on some of that stuff. But if it's like a limited quota tag that's a draw tag, it's hard to get. Standards are pretty high.
Mhm.
Obviously a large part because of where I work. But man, my kids are the same way. My wife shot a really nice whitetail buck the last 15 minutes of the last night of season.
Oh man, that's awesome.
About a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now. It was the 10th. So yeah, a week ago. 11 days. Well, yeah, whatever. 11 days ago. I suck at math. A word guy, right? Editor.
Yep.
But I did something different with that deer. Hung it up, let it sit overnight. Always do, but with the temperatures fluctuating so badly, I was like, we got to get this thing skinned. It broke down and in a cooler where temperature's steady. And then it could sit in a cooler. I think I usually rest them for 5 or 6 days before I butcher them. But when I butchered it,
Now, sorry, real quick. When you say let them rest, you let them rest in a cooler or in like a stand-up walk-in freezer?
it depends on the weather.
Okay.
It was cold enough at night. She shot it on a Friday evening, got it home, hung it in the tree in the front yard, and because it's easily accessible, otherwise I'd put it in the backyard. But I got a great big tree in my front yard. I can literally just zip right up in the tree with the bumper of my truck and then tie it off, and it's easy. And I live in Wyoming, so nobody cares if there's a deer hanging in the tree in my front yard. But I left it sit overnight. Then all the next day, I just let it hang with this height on, just got it out, aired out, let it cool out. And then Sunday, got up early and skinned it and broke it down into pieces, put it in bags, and then put it in a big cooler and covered it with Yeti ice packs. I don't like to use ice on top of my meat because I don't like to get my meat wet. I like that meat to be dry. And yeah, ideally, I'd have a steady constant, if the temp was in the 20s or 30s like every day, I just leave it hanging in the shade and let the air circulate around it, and it would be great. But with that fluctuation in temperature, that's a recipe for spoilage, big time. And so broke it down, got it in a cooler. But one of the things that I did immediately as I was breaking it down is I cut basically tomahawk steaks out of the back straps. They're called French chops, I think. But you leave a section of rib attached, so you end up with a little tomahawk steak. And on a whitetail buck, they're not real big, but I'd never done that before, and they ended up being carved and trimmed with a bone. They were probably an inch thick, and so that afternoon, I cooked them, and all I did was season them with Johnny's seasoning salt and fried them in outside my outside cooker in bacon grease. Just threw some bacon grease in a pan till it started to smoke and threw them in there for like 90 seconds on a side. I mean, they were rare in the middle. And dude, my kids were devouring them as fast as I could cook them. And you only get on a whitetail buck like that, it was a mature deer, probably 3 or 4 year old buck. I think I got 6 per side of those. And because you get too far forward and you get into you start getting into the neck, and the backstrap then gets all different filaments in it. You stay back kind of in that mid-rib section where those ribs are attached, and you just get these perfect chops. And they literally, I mean, they got blood running down their chin, and they're just like little savages, man, eating this venison off the bone. And they were like, Daddy, because they'd been sitting with my wife every single morning before school and every single night after school. and our deer movement was just lousy. It was warm, and the deer weren't moving during daylight hours hardly at all. And then the one night that they don't sit with her, I had them with me in the truck watching a beet field. I don't know how many miles away, and she shoots this deer, and they weren't there, and they were kind of bummed. But then those rib chops definitely made up for it, though. And I was like, you guys can't eat all of those. You got to save some for your mom. She's the one that actually did this,
Yeah.
It was funny. But yeah, you talk about, eating big game or eating game. You're only limited by your imagination. I guarantee you there's some recipes out there. If you look up different ways to cook kidneys, there's some old school ways where you grind it up, make mince out of it, and do whatever. That kidney pie, I've had kidney pie. That was a big thing back where I grew up. It was like you take all the heart, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, and you chop it all up and you make a pie out of it. And you'd think, ugh, but it's not, man. It's delicious.
Yeah.
In our house, it goes liver. I usually don't eat kidneys, but it goes liver, heart, tenderloins. So
yeah, see, I just can't. I don't know. There's something even with beef livers. Like I just have never been able to handle that. It's a little too much for me. And then the texture is just. I'm not much of a texture person, but liver texture just gets me. Yeah. So I'm like,
it's not for It's not for everybody. It just is what it is.
But there's a lot of vitamins and good nutrients in the organs. Even the kidneys that you can eat and gain from them. There's specific vitamins for each organ, but I know the heart's super rich in that, and we've tried different things. I'll cut it up in little tiny strips, and we'll do like tacos out of it, basically, or fajitas with some avocado on top and some lime and a little bit of onion, and you're good to go.
It's almost lunchtime, dude. You're making me hungry.
I know, right? Last time, the last heart that we cooked up, we did little nuggets. So I have to be gluten free, so we used cornmeal, but we fried up the nuggets, and then like I did spicy ones where I mixed in a bunch of spices, and then I did just regular ones with some garlic and salt and stuff. And my son was like, running to all his friends, he's like, "Hey, come over, we're having nuggets." And they would eat it, and they're like, "Oh, what? It's a little chewy. What is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's heart. It's elk heart." And they're like, "Wait, what?" Like,
yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's awesome, dude. That is so cool. But it's the same thing at our house. We go. I remember some folks brought us a bunch of beef burger, and this was home raised, home butchered beef. It's super good stuff. And my kids started eating it, and they're like, "Daddy, this tastes funny." I'm like, "What do you mean it tastes funny?" They're like, "This elk tastes funny." And I'm like, "Well, it's not elk, guys. It's beef." "Oh, like a cow? Like a moo cow?" And I went, "Yeah." Right there, I went, "Okay. Okay, I pretty much feed my kids from the fat of the land." Not, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, they're looking at, we watched this guy smoke this mule deer buck. Had my two girls out coyote hunting last winter, and we were coming back, and super cold, and this big old buck comes flying out of the ditch, and this dude smacks it, and it's busted up bad. And first thing my girl says, "Daddy, can we take that deer home and eat it?" I was like, "Not that one, guys. We don't need meat that bad. We've got we got a freezer full. That one's going to be coyote food." So
yeah, that's that's one of those. You're like, I don't want to deal with all the bone shards. I don't want to deal with all that. Like, it's like when you eat eggs and you get a little crunch in there. You're like, yeah.
Yep, I hear you. Oh man. Yeah, you're making me hungry. It's almost lunchtime.
Perfect. So we've hit on, let's see, we said at the beginning of the podcast we're going to hit on religion, politics, finances, No,
we pretty much have. We haven't talked about politics, and I don't think we need to, but
yeah.
No, I mean, it's just fun to get on and have a conversation and talk, and talk about hunting. People ask me, that's one of the funny things about they think I hunt all the time. They're like, oh, you're in the hunting industry. You must hunt for a living. And I'm like, no, the guy next door, Dan
Yeah.
Picard, does, but that's his job. He's a content producer, and his job is to be in the field and producing hunting content. You know, there's times when I do that. I have to do that for Wingmen, which our season for that is coming. It's basically starting now as big game seasons wind down. Then I'll be in the field a lot more. But a lot of my job is right here at this desk, you know, producing written content and editing content, and everybody has to do their part. Otherwise this machine doesn't function.
Right.
And so it's just like anything else. You know, I'm out hunting on weekends just like everybody else is. And I do have the luxury of being able, as long as my job is not being compromised, my workload's not being compromised. Ike Eastman, the owner and our boss, is very understanding about, go hunting. You work for a hunting company. If it's a Wednesday and you can get away, go do it. That's really nice to be able to have, because as an educator, I did not have that. I did not have that.
So I guess let's talk about that a little bit, because I agree. It's something that, you know, at the bow shop, for example, they always said, you know, if you like shooting your bow, don't get into an archery shop. Like, don't work for an archery shop. Don't own an archery shop if you like shooting your bow. It's very similar with the outdoors industry, unless you are a content creator that has to get out and create that content. A lot of you know, people that work in the industry don't actually get out to hunt as often as people would think. And so I guess, you know, something that I'd like to hit on with you, because you're more of you're a big game hunter as well, but you enjoy bird hunting. I'm not a bird hunter at all. And so, and I joke about it, saying if I went down that rabbit hole, my family would never see me ever, because you get bird season, then you get spring bear and whatever else you can do down in Texas, shoot stuff in the spring. Then you've got TAC during the summer. So Total Archery Challenge, for people that don't know what that is, and Mountain Archery Fest. Between those two, that's my summer. And then you've got the fall, where you've got, you know, elk starts in August. If you get a mule deer tag here in Utah, it starts in August as well, goes through September. And then you've got whitetail, you've got the rut for mule deer, and then you have your late season tags. And it's like, you could literally hunt all year round if you played your cards right. I can't really do that with kids at home. And my wife isn't interested in getting into hunting. So I'm not going to be doing that. So, but with bird hunting, walk us through a little bit about, you know, why do you enjoy it so much? I've had a couple people on that have talked about it, where, for example, Bert Soren talked about how it's a great way to get kids into hunting, because you don't have to be quiet. You don't have to get up super early. You don't have to be in the, you know, you can drink hot chocolate, you can eat snacks, you can joke around. Those are some cool things from a dad perspective, getting kids into it. But what draws you to bird hunting so much?
I don't know what the hell Bert is talking about, because just getting up early, I get up way earlier to hunt ducks and geese than I ever do for hunting big game. I mean,
I think he's got a property.
He must have something with somebody out there doing all the work for him. No, I'm teasing. I've never actually met Bert, but he's been on with Brian and the guys. We're all connected a little bit that way. But so for me, bird hunting started as just something that you did. If you were a hunter growing up in Michigan, big game opportunities were extremely limited. You know, you had deer, you had whitetail hunting that everybody did. Literally everybody hunted deer.
Even the Yoopers?
Yes, and that's where I grew up, was in the UP, don't you know? And there's guys sitting in deer camp right now going, oh, geez, yeah, pretty slow. Them wolves, they got all them deer eaten up. You know, we're not seeing much this year.
I was forced to watch that movie, Escanaba in the Moonlight, and oh my God.
The first hour is spot on. And all my buddies that still live up there are like, that's not us. That's not us. I'm like, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Now, after the first hour, it just gets weird and I shut it off. But yeah, that's required watching every year. Gonna get a buck this year, buck list? Holy jeez. But yeah, No, it was so bird hunting was whether it was upland bird like rough grouse and woodcock hunting, duck hunting, goose hunting, it's just hunting. That's just
Right.
what you did, and that transition to small game. I guess I'd be considered even now a generalist because from small game, rabbits, squirrels, to wing shooting, upland birds and waterfowl to big game, I love it all. Like I said earlier, there's definitely things I like to do best,
Hmm.
but that's kind of how the bird hunting stuff got started for me. My dad was an avid bird hunter, and it was just opportunity more than anything. We weren't the family that the only time we hunted was during 2 weeks during deer season, firearm deer season. I mean, we hunted September 1st when we could get out in the woods. We were in the woods until we couldn't be anymore starting in December. And even then we'd hunt, coyotes all winter long, or trap or hunt snowshoe hares or whatever. But wing shooting started for me, bird hunting started for me because it was accessible. It was something I had access to, and I could do it at a young age pretty much on my own. And there's different levels to it. Obviously, there's the guys that drive around and shoot the ground pound rough grouse, or they shoot stuff,
Hmm.
road hunt basically. And then there's the guys that have the dogs and have the gear, and they buy, they're buying a specific shotgun. And then the waterfowl is this whole other thing with all the gear that can go along with that. And I love all of it. I love all of it. I love the Bert, back to Bert Soren. He's not wrong about it's accessible for kids. I take my kids to the duck blind or the goose blind all the time. They love it. They know that means fun. That means snacks. That means action. That means they're going to have a good time with dad. And they're going to get to see these two lazy Labrador retrievers that we have laying around the house all year actually pull their weight for a few months of the year. So there's just something about it to me. I love watching birds work decoys when it comes to waterfowl. I love walking the uplands in search of pheasants and chuckers and sage grouse or rough grouse. I love, setting up decoys and all of the gear and equipment that goes with it and geeking out on that stuff. I love calling ducks and geese and turkeys too, for that matter, being able to work an animal. And that transitions into elk hunting,
Hmm.
archery elk hunting, if you're a caller. Just so much of that stuff. But I love the camaraderie. I love the brotherhood of bird hunting. I love the history around it. Just like anything, there is a rich history that surrounds
Hmm.
wing shooting in general that goes way, way back, and even into Europe. And just the tradition and the shotguns and the gear and the dogs and the camaraderie. Like you said, I can't go and screw around in a duck blind. I can't do those things on an elk hunt the same way that I can in a duck blind.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're doing. I feel like big game hunting is more like type 2 fun. A lot of it sucks a lot while you're doing it, and then when you get done, you're like, yeah, that was awesome. Let's go do that again.
Yeah.
At 45 years old, I'm like, give me a couple of days, and then let's go do that again. Where with bird hunting in particular, especially waterfowl hunting, you can sit in a blind and you can laugh and you can tell stories and you can fellowship, and you're drinking Juniper Mountain coffee and sitting there with a bag of donuts, and you're just chilling. And it's so much of that, especially after a fall in the West, the way our seasons are structured, bird hunting comes second for me, especially. November, December, January, and February are the times when I'm really hard focused on bird hunting. September, October, and first parts of November, that's big game, and that's the only chance I get to hunt big game throughout this year. So that's when I'm doing it, unless I get lucky and draw some of these late season tags.
Hmm.
And so I've had an entire fall of grinding, whether I'm in the mountains chasing elk, or whether I'm trying to find deer, or whether I'm sorting through antelope trying to find the buck. I'm grinding, I'm sitting there behind glass and the stakes are a little higher too, because unlike waterfowl hunting in particular, I'm only going to get so many opportunities to punch that tag. I may find a, you're only going to call in so many elk and get
Right.
so many
Yeah.
opportunities with your bow over the course of a fall. And on waterfowl, especially if you've done all your homework and you've scouted well and your skill set's pretty dialed, you're going to get multiple opportunities in a morning or in a day. Upland bird hunting is a little bit different. It's more like big game in that you're covering a lot of ground and your opportunities might be fairly limited. So you got to capitalize on what you have, but it's just lower key than
Right.
big game. It's more social than big game because you don't have to, especially in waterfowl, you can't be out there yelling and running around and
No.
screaming
Yeah.
at the top of your lungs, but you can have a conversation and laugh and carry on, which you can't really do that on most big game hunts.
Yeah.
So
No, for sure. It sounds like, and I get this from a lot of the people that talk to us, kind of almost like a nice break from grinding it out in the mountains, for the time that you're out there chasing big game. And it's just something that for me, as far as time wise, money wise, I don't have the budget for it either way.
well,
Because
and it's funny because I think when we call it a break,
Mm.
it does it a disservice, and it does, and I'm not throwing you under the bus, but I hear
no.
a lot of the big game guys, everybody's got their thing, right? And their thing is their thing.
Mhm.
And I'm weird in the fact that, like I said before, I just love to hunt and I love it all. But I hear a lot of big game guys, especially, think, and they'll say, "Oh, it's a nice break. It's a nice break. Like it's not as hard or it's not as important
Mm.
as the big game stuff." And I know a lot of big game guys they're very, very good at what they do
Mhm.
that really suck at hunting ducks or geese
Yeah.
because it's all it is it's not the same kind of physical challenges that we face hunting big game, but it's more of a chess match where
Mm.
if you're not on the spot, you're not going to shoot birds. And guys get frustrated with that. I think, oh, it's just a stupid bird. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, but it comes with its own sets of challenges and its own skills
Right.
that have to be mastered. And the guys that are really, really good at it, they've put in a lot of time and they've learned an awful lot to consistently go out and shoot limits, especially later in the seasons when the birds get wise. Because they're like, oh, they're just flying around all over the place. Let's go, set up decoys, and it's like, yeah, you watch the guys that do that, and they don't shoot anything. They're not successful, in
Gotcha.
the sense of harvesting birds.
Yeah.
The guys that are consistently harvesting limits, they've got a skill set dialed, and they're good at what they do. It's the same as the guys that are consistently successful in the mountains on elk or mule deer or you name it. There's skills to be mastered for sure.
No, yeah, for sure. And so almost more like whitetail hunting, where it's more of a chess rather than going out and um, just kind of glassing and then making a game plan, maybe e-scouting ahead of time. So that okay. I mean, that makes sense.
It's really similar to the whitetail game in the fact that whitetails are kind of the redheaded stepchild in the West, compared to mule deer or elk. They really get looked down on. You're like, oh, anybody can shoot a whitetail. That's easy. You just go out and down whatever.
I can say that that's not the
Different.
case from my experience.
No, it's different. They're a
Yeah.
different skill set. And what makes guys really good at hunting mule deer, for example, doesn't necessarily equate to being good at shooting whitetails, especially when you go back to the Midwest or
Right.
someplace like you said, go to Ohio. What's the first thing you do when you see an animal? Just quick question. First thing you do when you see an animal? Yep. And I'm saying
any
big game
animal
hunters
or a whitetail.
So you're out hunting elk,
Mhm.
and you spot with your naked eye, you spot a bull.
Yeah.
And he's a ways off. He's not up close. What's the first thing you do?
Well, I pull out my binos.
There you go, right there.
Yeah.
right there. And what's the movement that's associated with that?
Well, it's this. Yeah. Yeah.
You do that in a tree stand in Ohio, and every deer
Mm-mm.
within 100 yards knows you're there.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Totally different skill sets. Totally
Yep.
different skill sets. It's and it's the same way for the guys that hunt back there. They might look at big country and go, where do I begin? Just different,
Yeah.
you
No,
know.
I agree. Yeah, it's definitely a different thing. And even though for me, like elk still get me more excited than any other animal, I'm, I may be I may be partial towards elk, but I definitely want to make whitetail part of my yearly trips. And mule deer whenever I can get a tag. Those are always fun to find and kind of stepping up. I'm still relatively new to hunting, so for me, it's like, I've shot a spike, I've shot a forky, now I'm moving up,
Mm-hmm.
and those are kind of my own standards that I've set. I'm not quite to your level where I can be super picky. I'm just like, if it's brown, it's down sometimes. And, that's just kind of, my own way of handling it. But no, I agree. I just, with hunting in general, it's definitely fun to experience different, and different skill sets, and then also keeping yourself entertained in the stand for hours. When you're sitting there for whitetail, it's like,
That's what podcasts
where
are
I
for.
went was in the middle of BFE, and we didn't have. What'd you say?
I said that's what podcasts are for.
Oh yeah, right. Well, here's the problem: is I didn't have any cell service out there. It was literally in the middle of BFE, and
Got
so like I
downloaded.
had to either have it downloaded because
Yeah.
like my mindset was I'm going to go out there and I'm going to work emails and stuff like that while I'm up in the stand. And I I verified with the guy. I was like, we're gonna have good Wi-Fi, right? He's like, oh yeah, we'll have good Wi-Fi. He said, and then you might have some coverage in most of the stands that we're sitting in. Nope. And then like the Wi-Fi, oh man, let me tell you, it was that was a struggle.
So
And yeah.
where I grew up in the North Country, in the UP, you would go days without
Mm.
seeing a deer. And we baited because that was the deer densities in the part of the UP I grew up in. Deer densities were so low that the only way that you were going to see anything was to bait.
Might see a wolf before you see a deer.
And now, back then, there weren't hardly any wolves around. They were really, really, really rare. There were always some running around, but especially the corner I grew up in, because they just come back and forth across the ice from Canada. So there's always a few around, but not like there is now. And they're overrun in that country.
Man.
And but yeah, I got buddies that have now that in the era of cell cameras, they just go to deer camp and they would watch their cell cam, and they'll go days without having a deer on the bait.
Mm.
And then a lot of that camp, those guys are like, they're talking about even selling that camp because the deer hunting is so poor that nobody hardly hunts anymore.
Man.
And so it's really rough.
That's
but
rough.
that you would think that, oh yeah, I'm going to go do emails, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. But I could tell you from firsthand experience, because I used to read books on stand, and you read a sentence or two, and you look up, look around, read a sentence or two, and look up, look around. And I missed opportunities at bucks because I was otherwise engaged.
Yeah.
So it's
and then they
brutal.
come in from the wrong angle, and you have no control. Like that's why for me, and I'm going to go over this in a future podcast here about difference between tree stands and saddles. From my week experience of, I think it was like 14 sits or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one time where I would have had a good 6 point, which I would have shot if I had been in a saddle, but I was in the stand, and he came back from my back right, and I'm a right-handed bow shooter, and the wind was blowing towards him. He got to 25 yards, stuck his nose in the air, and he stood there. I mean, it would have been an easy shot all day, chip shot. But he stood there, and I got my bow around into my lap, and then I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, how do I have to stand up to turn around.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I'd been in a saddle, I could have just easily kind of rotated a little bit, and I would have been there. And so, there's things like that too, that the 1 or 2 opportunities you get, there's still things out of your control as to like where they come from, or, all the squirrels sound like the biggest buck you've ever seen. all the leaves
Yeah.
dropping and the wind blowing and all, like, everything just is amplified out there in the whitetail woods, and you kind of have to,
Yeah.
figure things out. And then there's other times where you're like, oh, that's just a squirrel, and then you look up, you're like, oh, that's definitely not a squirrel. That's a
Yeah.
big deer.
Yeah. It's that, and that's the thing about whitetail hunting. I talked to a lot of guys that are Western big game guys, and they're going to go back to Ohio or
Hmm.
Illinois or Indiana or Wisconsin or someplace, and they're going to bow hunt for deer. And I tell them, you probably don't have warm enough clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Like your layering system probably isn't dialed. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it is. I could sit on a glassing knob all day, and I'm like, yeah, because you can get
No.
up and you can stand up, move around. We don't realize as Western hunters how much freedom we have
Mm-hmm.
to move around, whether it's even just stretch, to stand up and stretch, or
Yeah.
build a fire. And I'm like, no, I don't. You don't understand, man. You're going to be sitting in one place, being largely motionless
Mm-hmm.
for hours on
Mm-hmm.
end in 20 to 40 degree temps with 70 to 80% humidity.
Yep.
We don't have that kind of humidity in the West.
Dude,
You know,
I got up there and there was I had, and my feet are I run hot in general. And so
yeah,
like
yeah,
the most
yeah.
insulated boots I have are like 200 gram insulation. And that's what I use this time of year when it's
Hmm.
snowy and I don't get, like, my feet don't get cold, even when I sit down to glass. Dude, I was up there and I had to put toe warmers in after the first day because even with those insulated boots, my toes were getting cold. And luckily, I thawed it out a little bit, and I had a hand warmer, like a muff that I
Hmm.
stuck like 2 to 3 hand warmers in, and that kept my hands warm. But and then the last day I was there, the wind was so bad. Even with my nice jacket and everything else, man, I was cold.
Yep.
And
Yep.
there's nothing you can do. It's like, well, I can go back to the cabin, but then I might miss out on something. You never know, you know.
Yeah,
It's
your
just
kit,
it's
your
crazy.
gear is different for
Hmm.
doing that, and it has to be dialed. Heated layers are they're game changers.
Yeah,
I'm like back to my brother that lives in Iowa. He runs a heated vest all the time, and he's
I
like,
don't doubt it.
I don't have to wear half the layers that I used to have to wear to stay warm. He was like, I'm more mobile. I can draw my bow. I can move, like you said.
Oh yeah,
Angles don't matter because I'm not all bound up with a bunch of clothes on. But yeah, there's things about it. It's different whether it's whitetails or elk or mule deer or pronghorn. There's just facets to all of those games that if you're a truly dedicated hunter, you're going to learn on the fly and you're going to apply those things as you go, or you're going to try to the best you can, but you're never going to be 100% dialed,
yeah,
in everything, because there's going to be something that's different, something that's new and challenging. And well, if you get to the point where something's easy, then you need to try doing it a different way or pick up something else and keep challenging yourself.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. Well, I've had you for a little over an hour now. Is there
Oh,
anything that we haven't brought up that
oh, this has
you
gone
really for the
fast.
audience? I know, right?
This has been I've had a really good time just BSing, and it's always fun to chat with, a fellow hunter and a dad and a husband. It's just a good time, but I appreciate you having me on, and I'd like to give my own podcast a shout out. It's the Wingmen Podcast by Eastmans Hunting Journals, and you can find it anywhere you get your podcasts. We talk, it's all bird hunting and lots of different guests, lots of different stuff, everything from gear to hunts to just being a better person in general. But fun time, and I appreciate you having me on, and good luck on the rest of the hunts you got this year.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I got 2 elk tags to fill, so
That a
we'll
boy.
hopefully we'll have to buy another freezer. Um, all right. Well, with that being said, guys, I'm going to leave the links down below. Thanks again so much, Todd, for your time today, and you guys go check out his podcast. And like I said, and I always say, get out, live your life, and love it. All right. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Todd. He is an outstanding wealth of knowledge, does so many things over there at Eastman's, and I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed having this conversation. So, Again, just a reminder, guys, check out the links down below for any discounts that you may be needing as far as buying gear for your hunting, for your camping, for your backpacking, for your training. All the discounts and links are down below. What that does is that it helps me. It also helps you. You save money and you help some of those give kickbacks to me so that I can continue to produce good content for you. And I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Subscribe to the channel if you like. And of course, leave a comment down below with any questions. I love engaging with you guys there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And of course, get out, live your life, and love it.